The remaster for Oblivion has been a blast for me to play this last few weeks or so. Taking off the rose-tinted glasses, I can definitely tell there have been some issues with it too. So for this video, I'm going to discuss the positives of the remaster first, and go into some detail about why I think it's a blast from the past, and I will also be talking about the negatives of the remaster, and things I wish they changed instead of copying from the original, things I wish they didn't change from the original, and things I hope get fixed with patches in the future. Then at the end of the video, I'll discuss my opinion on the value of the game, and if it's worth owning now or waiting for a sweet discount. With all that said, let's talk about the positives of the remaster. The first thing that I immediately noticed when I played the Oblivion Remaster is that the combat is way better than the original game. When your weapon makes contact with an enemy, you can actually feel the weight of the strike, unlike in the original game, where when you hit an enemy, it felt more like a pool noodle than it did an actual weapon. I also like that the remaster added new weapon animations, and it also added new sound effects for combat. For instance, when you block an enemy's attack, the sound it makes I think sounds pretty good, especially when you compare it with the original, and I think the new sound feedback you get from combat definitely helps improve the experience past the original. And I've been using the dagger for this playthrough, and I love the new stabbing animations that they added. It makes sense with the dagger, and it feels really good, especially the sound effects. It's a big improvement from the original. I also like that they changed the leveling system in the remaster, because in the original game it was far too grindy, and especially with how world scaling works, if you did not properly level up your character, you were going to be left behind and slaughtered by the monsters in the game because they would be out-leveling you in every turn. The next positive I want to talk about when it comes to this remake is that the graphics for the most part look good, and it's an overall improvement from the original Oblivion. I feel the remaster will make trying Oblivion for new players a lot more palatable than before, thanks to how it looks. The armor and weapon sets in the remaster look great. I especially like the look of the glass, ebony, and dwarven sets. The landscape in the remaster looks way better than in the original game. And even though I did like the color palette of the original game a little bit better, I still think the lighting in the remaster is just leaps and bounds better than the original Oblivion, which makes sense when we're comparing a game from 2006 with the remaster in 2025. I also think that the character models, despite being far from perfect, look way better than they did back in the original game. And a good example of this is how the Dark Elves look like the Dark Elves from Morrowind and Skyrim in the remaster when compared to the original game where they just looked like blueberry people. Those are the things that really pop out to me when it comes to positives of the remaster. And I could go on about how Oblivion's questing is amazing, how I love the factions. The main quest is probably the best main quest since Morrowind. I could also talk about how I think Oblivion has the best combat system in any Elder Scrolls game, with the fact that you can shoot a fireball while wielding a sword and shield. I could also talk about how I like the diversity in magic, and how I think Oblivion takes the best features of Morrowind, but doesn't water itself too much like what happened with Skyrim. But with how much I love Oblivion, I could not be neutral in these points, and I'd be very biased. So with the positives out of the way, let's go into the negatives of the remaster. Because even though I have been enjoying it, there are a bunch of negatives that I need to talk about. And just to let you guys know, I've been playing on the Series S, so PC may have more problems because that's been a trend with unoptimized PC games. So if there are any issues I haven't talked about, just let me know in the comments. The first and biggest problem I have with the remaster is that I think the UI is absolute garbage. I think the original game had a better UI, and I would have preferred that they kept the settings and inventory/character stuff separated instead of bunching it all together. As it is now in the remaster, it is really hard to navigate, and I absolutely hate that because all they had to do was copy and paste from the original game. With the settings and character/inventory all being together, it makes navigating everything more of a nightmare than it used to be, and it's completely unnecessary. It's not an improvement from the original game. The UI in the original game was better. Without using the shortcuts that I use on my D-pad to navigate the menus easier, it would be a complete nightmare for me to go from inventory to save, because I'd have to click too many buttons. And I'm glad they added the shortcuts. It's the only saving grace of the menus. But I hate that it's like that. It shouldn't be like that. They should have just copied the original. Don't fix what isn't broke. Also, the save menu is barely functional. I will try to delete autosaves or just delete saves, and sometimes they don't delete. I also had a time where I thought all my saves were getting deleted because they were disappearing from the save menu, and I was afraid I was going to have to start back in the Imperial Sewers, where I was at the very beginning of the game before you exit to the open world, but thankfully all my saves are just hidden. And I'm happy they were just hidden, but let me just say, if that was my last save and the game had been deleting my saves, this video would have been very different. I also wish that they kept the subcategories in the inventory. They used to separate the items there by the subcategories of potions, ingredients, and apparatus. Now it is all bunched up together and organized alphabetically, making it more painful to navigate the inventory menu. Moving away from the UI talk, the next thing that I really wish they had changed but they didn't was the way world scaling works. World scaling, in my opinion, is one of the reasons why Oblivion is not a perfect game. I wish the remaster changed it to where it was more like Morrowind, Skyrim, or Fallout 4. The first issue I have with world scaling in Oblivion specifically, and Fallout 3, is that when everything scales with you, it makes leveling up not only suboptimal, but it kind of takes the point out of leveling. In my opinion, the idea of leveling is to show that you're getting more powerful. So when everything is getting more powerful with you, it takes the point out of leveling. It feels good to level up because you're supposed to be getting more powerful and killing things easier that you used to have a hard time with. But when you're not fighting those things that you used to have a hard time with and you're fighting new things, it's just a bad feeling. It doesn't feel good. You don't have that sense of progression that you should, and that's why it got fixed in Skyrim and Fallout 4, and Morrowind does a completely different system that doesn't have that problem. World scaling also gives enemies like bandits the best armor in the game. So you'll get to a point where bandits are wearing all Daedric, ebony, glass, and it's just ridiculous to see when they shouldn't be wearing those types of armor. And it's extra ridiculous to see random farmers in the middle of nowhere have Daedric armor too. Oblivion's world scaling also hurts enemy variety, because after a certain point, you stop seeing scamps, clanfears, wolves, rats, fire atronachs, or any other low-level enemy, which does affect gameplay, specifically alchemy. I also wish they didn't have leveled items, because now I'm waiting to get to level 30 to do the factions, because some of the equipment you can get, I want to have the best version of it, instead of getting the crappy old version that I'll have to get rid of. The next negative point I want to talk about is the graphics. And I do think the graphics are better in the remaster than the original, but that does not mean that the remaster graphically is perfect. A good example of that is some of the NPCs look like they were created with AI instead of having someone actually make them. A good example would be some of the Argonians. They have really long snouts, and their eyes look like they're on their forehead instead of where they belong. Also, the lighting can look really nice in the game, but it can also make the game look way uglier than it used to be with how it mutes the colors in the world. And the last thing is there's a lot of clipping in the game that I kind of wish got ironed out. Specifically when you're wearing robes, if you're wearing gauntlets and boots that are from like armor, you'll notice if you fast travel to a different area with that stuff on, that it'll start clipping when the developers obviously intended for it to not clip. And this last point I want to make isn't necessarily a negative, but I kind of wish that the game lets you play with the new graphics or the old school graphics, kind of like what we saw with Halo 2 Anniversary or Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary. I think giving people more options, especially with the way they want to look at the game, is the best policy to have, and I'm kind of sad they didn't go with it. Now, for the last part, I want to talk about the performance of the remaster, because it can use some ironing out. Now, I've been playing on Xbox, so if PCs had its own performance issues, because you're an open system, just say so in the comments, because my experience will be a bit different than yours. When I talk to people outside of cities, I tend to have really bad frame drops. When I leave the menus, it can take a while for my game to realize that I'm no longer in the menu, making me wait there for a long time for no reason. The new VAs for Oblivion Remake need work because the volume for them sound off. A good example is that the new Town Guard's voice actor sounds a bit too low, especially when compared to Wes Johnson's talking volume. I've also seen some pretty apparent graphical glitches, with the most notable being the exterior of the Imperial City Arena, the White Gold Tower, and I obviously just talked about clothing clipping with the character models. With all that said about negatives and positives, let's talk about the value of the game. Should you, as the customer, buy this game for $50 to $60-ish? In my opinion, no. I would personally wait a few months to maybe a year for a good discount. Don't misunderstand though, I do think this remaster is fun and I will personally buy this game in the future, but for me right now, there are too many issues with the game that I think it would be best to wait a bit and let Virtuous make the changes needed to improve the player experience before I would fork over any money to them, or think you should fork over any money to them. Thanks for watching the video. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and let me know your opinions about the remaster in the comments. And with that said,
I'm sorry, sir. It's time for you to leave.